All right, guys, and welcome to this final section now of our economic geography unit as we begin looking at now the urbanization piece of this puzzle. Um, and realistically speaking, I guess I want to start out by saying that we live in a very, very unique time in human history when it comes to this particular topic. In fact, you guys belong to a generation that has never existed before in human history, or a generation that is able to say something that no other generation previous to you guys has ever been able to say. And that is that worldwide, now in 2020, more people live in urban areas than rural areas. This is for the first time in history. In fact, this just happened back in 2008 when you guys were like four. Is when, for the first time, I doubt it made any headlines, but for the first time in human history, as of 2008, more people live in urban areas than rural areas. Believe it or not, as recently as the year 1800, only about 3% of the world's population lived in cities. Only about 3%. And only one city in the world, London, had more than 1 million inhabitants. Uh, Now there are 532 cities in the world with 1 million inhabitants. Take a look at the growth that happens of urban areas over time. Yeah, I mentioned that as recently as 1800, only about 3% of humans lived in cities. By the time that you get to 1850, that number is about 6%. By 1900, 14%. By 1950, 30%. You see what's happening here? And by the year 2000, about 45%. Yeah, and now, of course, post '08, more people live in cities than not. In fact, in China, for example, which is traditionally a rural country, China reached the point where more than 50% of its population lived in urban areas in 2010. Even in the year 2000, only 36% of Chinese lived in cities, and 10 years later, it was over half. It just, you talk about really, really, really rapid growth here. Something to keep in mind when we are talking about cities is definitionally what we mean by certain words that we use. When we're talking about the word city, we are talking about here an agglomeration of people and buildings clustered together to serve as a center of politics, of culture, and of economics. I'm going to repeat that, right? When we're using the term city, we are talking about an agglomeration of people and buildings clustered together to serve as a center of politics, culture, and economics. So, whereas rural settlements are centers for agriculture and provide a small amount of services, urban settlements are centers of community, consumer, and business services. Also, keep in mind that cities are legally incorporated, yeah, which means they basically have boundaries, yeah, and they're independent and they're self governing, all right. For example, take a look here at the map of the city of Atlanta. You don't live in the city of Atlanta. You live in an area called unincorporated Cobb County, which I'll explain to you guys in a minute what that is. But this is a map of the city of Atlanta. Notice how the city of Atlanta has very distinct boundaries. Yeah. Notice that it even has essentially council districts, just like the United States, right, which is divided into House congressional districts where each district has a representative in Congress. In a city like the city of Atlanta, you're going to have a number of council districts where you'll have a city council person, a representative, represent you in City Hall, right, in front of the mayor. The mayor being the executive, your city council people being legislators. Legally incorporated, independent, self-governing. That's what a city actually is. You guys don't live in the city of Atlanta. In fact, you don't live in any city at all. And I'm going to show you why in just a second here. Let me pull up for you. Most of you guys, if somebody asks you, what city do you live in? You'll say, oh, I live in the city of Marietta. But actually not. The city of Marietta is what you are looking at here in the, too much. Try to zoom back out. The city of Marietta is what you're looking at on the screen here. Let me get rid of this sidebar. Everything that you see in red are the boundaries of the city of Marietta. Where you guys live is actually right here. You see my mouse kind of moving there. That's Pope High School, what I'm pointing to there, way outside of the boundaries of the city of Marietta. And then you guys kind of live either in a zip code called 30062 or in a zip code called 30075, which are either Marietta or Roswell mailing addresses, but you don't live in the city of Marietta or you don't live in the city of Roswell. You live in an unincorporated area, an area where no city has legally incorporated that space into their boundaries, and there is no independent self-governing city. Instead, I guess the government that you would be subject to on a local level would be the government of Cobb County. That's why you've never seen in your neighborhood a Marietta Police Department car. You're going to see Cobb County Police Department, right? Because we live in an unincorporated area. Anyway, news you can use. Where you do live, though, is you do live in an urban area. You don't live in a city, but you certainly live in an urban area. Well, a lot of times when we think urban area, people mistakenly think, oh, tall buildings and dense population. But by definition, when we use the term urban area, we're referring to the built up space of both the central city and its suburbs. So basically the city and its surrounding environments connected to the city. That's what we mean when we're talking about urban area. And if you look at this particular map here, wow, metropolitan Atlanta is incredibly large. And all of those areas that you see in red and pink are essentially urban areas within the metropolitan area of Atlanta. Notice the city of Atlanta itself, pretty small, but Cobb County, highly urbanized, as is Gwinnett County, as is DeKalb, as is Clayton, as are parts of other counties like Cherokee and Rockdale and Henry County, Coweta County. There's smaller patches of urban area there as well. The point here being, ladies and gentlemen, that when we use the term urban, we're talking about the central city and its suburbs. So please keep that in mind as we go forward, as far as just our usage of the term urban versus our usage of the term city. Now, as far as urbanization goes, the percentage of people that live, of course, in urban areas is over half the human population globally, right? We've mentioned that before. And a lot of times this reflects levels of development. About 77% of people living in developed countries, in more developed countries, right? MDCs, about 77% of people living in developed countries live in urban areas. Only about 48% in developing. The gap is closing, but the reality is that urbanization is oftentimes a sign of development. The percentage of people in Latin America that live in urban areas is pretty much comparable now to the developed world, but that makes sense considering Latin America's own development and its place in demographic transition as well. But only 33% of people in South Asia live in urban areas. Only 38% of people in sub-Saharan Africa live in urban areas. So this is important to keep in mind. One of the other things that we want to have on our radar regarding urbanization in this unit is the size of urban settlements changing so much. Although developing countries have a smaller percentage of people living in urban areas, developing countries have more very large urban settlements. 7 of the 10 largest cities in the world, and we'll address these cities now. Your 10 largest cities in the world are Tokyo, Jakarta in Indonesia, Delhi is at number 3 right now. Manila 4. Seoul 5. Well, you know what? I'll pull up the chart here for you to see. Dame un momento. Had a good bookmark on a. There we go. That works. Ah, yes. Okay. This is our annual report that we get um, that tracks size of cities. And let's see here. These are your largest cities in the world. These are your largest, I should use the term urban areas in the world in 2020. So you see Tokyo at the top there, and then Jakarta, and then Delhi, and then Manila, Seoul at number 5, Mumbai, India at 6, Shanghai at 7, New York at 8, Sao Paulo at 9, and Mexico City at number 10. When you look at this chart and what's on it, you will notice that 7 of the 10 largest cities in the world are in developing countries, right? Only Tokyo, Seoul, and New York would be considered cities in the developed world. And 41, I believe, out of the top 50 are in developing countries. In fact, if you were to look at a list of the largest, or excuse me, of the fastest growing cities in the world, only 3 of the 100 fastest growing cities in the world are in the developed world. And by the way, all 3 of those cities are in the United States, and you live in one of them. Yeah, Atlanta is, along with Austin, Texas, and Las Vegas, Nevada, these are the only 3 urban areas that are in the fastest growing urban areas, 100 fastest growing urban areas in the world category. That's in the developed world. The 3 fastest growing cities you probably have never heard of. So, there are, some real considerations to look at there in terms of the size of urban settlements and some of the patterns that we see. So, hopefully, that gives you a little bit of a brief introduction / overview to the world of urban geography. We're going to be digging into this a lot more throughout the next couple of weeks, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a terminology overview, and I think we will go ahead and shut things down for today. And so we'll see you tomorrow with a little bit more in-depth discussion on urban geography. See you then.